Living in the waters of the world are creatures more magnificent than mankind could ever imagine.
I wouldn't go that far. I can think of some pretty damn amazing stuff. So, and then there's also the legends of merfolk, of different sea creatures. So, we have quite a good imagination when it comes to what lives beneath the waves, which is a zone. It's almost alien to us because, it's still so unexplored. So, it's just kind of allowed the imagination to wander and have so many different thoughts in what could be down there. But anyway, greetings and welcome people to YouTube. This is Essence of 40, and of course I'm continuing with my God of Wonder series, and this is episode 5. We'll be dealing with aquatic life in this episode, so let's get down to fishy matters.
The enormous assortment of ocean dwellers speaks of the unlimited ingenuity of our great Creator. And each sea creature has been designed with remarkable functionality.
A problem with this is that over 99.9% of all species that have ever existed on this planet have gone extinct, a large number or proportion of them being marine life. So to then go on to say that these marine creatures have all been created with a well-made design is really pushing it. And we're not even going to get into the facts of how old the Earth is, because we have the fossils of these creatures, so no matter where they existed, if your story is true, your God is still a damn poor designer.
God equipped the octopus with a form of jet propulsion, suction cup technology, and self-adjusting camouflage far superior to any man-made design. Watch as this giant octopus morphs into a rock with algae. Its color, shape, and texture are all transformed in an instant.
Whenever a creationist argues that some creature is in some way biologically superior to man, they're running into a brick wall. You see, according to the Bible, we are God's #1 creation. Yet, if you believe there are other creatures that have gained traits more favourable than us, what does that tell you about our position in God's eye? Take, for example, the blue-ringed octopus, which has a deadly neurotoxin, which can kill us. So, just thought I'd point that fact out.
The squid on the left is a male. He shows a brownish-red courtship pattern toward the female, while simultaneously showing a white fighting pattern on his opposite side to ward off rival males. As he switches sides, his markings actually flip. Dual simultaneous signaling demonstrates God's engineering supremacy.
Or, it could just show how the natural systems, e.g. evolution, can cause great changes to an entire population or species, given the vast amount of time life has existed on Earth. You see, this doesn't actually show anything, even though you claim it to show it, because it can be argued to show evolution, it can be argued to show creationism. Therefore, it does not prove creationism or argue against creationism. It just shows squids can change colour, regardless of how. We must look at other evidence to come to the conclusion that this shows evolution or this shows creationism. Just thought I'd point that one out as well.
Underwater symbiotic relationships reveal perfect foresight in design planning. Sea anemones are poisonous, yet God has enabled certain fish to safely cohabitate in their environment. For example, clownfish are designed with an immunity to the anemone's poison. This could not have been inherited, as prior generations would have been killed and gone extinct before evolving a beneficial immunity.
Well, I disagree with your statement that this actually shows, a creator, because this must have been pre-designed, the symbiotic relationship, because a fish would not have the ability to gradually evolve immunity whilst living inside a sea anemone, because they would die prior to having offspring and passing on genes, etc., and inflating those traits. The reason is the fish doesn't have to live inside of the sea anemone to build up this resistance to immunity. Now, what do I mean? Well, every fish will have a different level of resistance to the venom of the sea anemone. If you didn't know, the sea anemone gives off its venom by special cells that actually burst and they fire out barbs. Now, it's not a case of a single barb touches you, the fish is dead. It is an accumulative effect, i.e. it fires off hundreds of these barbs and they all add on top of each other, and if you get enough of them as a fish, sadly, you'll die. So that's how it works, and each fish will have a different level of resistance. Now, let's say there's one fish that's learnt to not go into the anemone, but hang around it to deter predators, because if a predator rushes the fish can just dart behind the sea anemone, making it hard for the predator to get at the fish. So let's just say there's a type of fish that does this. And then also notice that food, there's food to be scavenged inside the sea anemone. The fish could try to get this, and if it's in out straight away, it's not necessarily going to trigger enough barbs to kill it. Now, the fish that have the most extreme resistance are more likely to survive and therefore more likely to get more food from scavenging, zipping in and out of the sea anemone. Therefore, this trait will become more and more extreme in the generations to come. Eventually, high resistance will blend in with immunity, forming a symbiotic relationship, as then the fish can actually live inside the anemone rather than around it, and can clean off the algae and the scraps of food. So, that's how the process could have evolved, and, that is just me coming up with a solution to what you have just stated. So that's one way. Another issue I take with what you have stated is that if God has created a symbiotic relationship, he's not very good at it. The reason is clownfish cannot survive in every type of sea anemone. They can only in fact survive in 10 species of sea anemone out of over 1,000. This is because different sea anemones have different types of venom and have different concentrations, different intensities, etc. The clownfish have only evolved to deal with a certain type of toxin or venom at up to a certain level, therefore giving them access to a certain range of anemones. It's quite possible that if given the time, they may be able to evolve to adapt to more anemones, etc., etc., widening the niche for more clownfish. So that's also an issue with what you just stated.
The schooling pattern of certain fish is still being researched. The ability for fish to dart with synchronized movements reveals the guiding hand of a grand conductor.
Or just schools of fish have a form of group psychology in motion, which there are a number of models that attempt to explain this, and there are a number of theories behind it. None of them include the guiding hand of God. If they are guided by God, does he steer every fish individually, or just like the lead fish?
Different species of fish have been relegated to dwell at specific levels of the ocean depths. This capability is the result of a specially designed air bladder, which secretes gases from the bloodstream, regulating the pressure, maintaining equilibrium. allowing the fish to survive at various water pressures within a range determined by the creator.
All this shows is that niches exist inside of different biomes. It's the same for rainforest, where you have the different layers of the canopy, i.e. upper canopy, lower canopy, you have the undergrowth, then you have the forest floor. So, it's the same for the ocean as it is in that scenario. When dealing with the rainforest in a niche example, the upper canopy comes with a lot of food, it's got a wide range of fruits, etc. That's a pro. Also, when dealing with mating calls or displays of territory, like the howler monkeys, it offers a very good platform for them to do that from. However, it also comes with its own cons. For example, raising young up in the canopy and mating in the canopy becomes very hazardous. Not howler monkeys, but if you're dealing with orangutans and other canopy living species, many orangutans have fractures where they've actually fallen from the canopy at a young age. However, they've managed to heal and keep going, as orangutans have evolved quite a good constitution when dealing with fractured bones. So it's the same sort of principle when dealing with the ocean. For example, living out in the open ocean, you can see everything around you, but everything can also see you, which is a very big issue, but it's also an advantage if you can be quicker than your opponent. Living around coral reefs, yes, okay, it offers a wide range of food. However, that will also attract a wide range of predators. For example, sea snakes, which do like going in and out of the rocks. They'll, bite a fish. Venom goes into that fish, dies practically instantly. So, there are pros and cons to every niche. Now, when dealing with this niche, the life form has to evolve to become the most efficient at what it does. So when dealing with, say, a bottom-living fish, like a flatfish, you don't want to waste precious nutrition on, developing a swim bladder that helps you with buoyancy when you want to be on the, ocean floor. You'd actually be wasting energy trying to get to the ocean floor and stay there compared to, if you just sort of downgraded your swim bladder. Whereas if you're an ocean-living fish like a barracuda, you're very streamlined, you're very fast, you don't want to waste energy which can be used, going forward on staying up, swimming up every now and then just to keep up as you keep sinking because you got no swim bladder. So the swim bladder in them, over generation after generation, becomes more and more exaggerated. This is the way evolution operates. Now, when evolving into these niches, you can either evolve into an empty niche, for example, the very first life forms, or life forms following a natural disaster, because very often, after the extinction events especially, there are a number of niches that just open up and instantly, relatively speaking, in geographical terms, we're still talking about thousands, if not millions of years, these niches are then filled. Or you can go into a form of competition. For example, in Britain we have the red squirrel and the invasive grey squirrel, which is currently fighting for the niche of the squirrel in the UK, i.e. being the species that goes out, gathers the acorns and whatnot. So that's just a rough explanation. Of course, I can't go into it in further detail, so we need to continue with the other points of the video.
One of my absolutely favorite sea creatures is the pearly nautilus, or the chambered nautilus. Here's a shell like you might find in a Florida shell shop, and when you cut these down the middle, woo, look at that, all these little chambers inside. The animal that lives in the last chamber here is essentially a squid. It has lots of little tentacles coming out the front like that. All these little chambers enable it to regulate its buoyancy like a submarine does. Inside that amazing squid, there's a brain, there's an eye that sees the world like we do. There's a digestive system with salivary glands and a pancreas gland. They have 3 different hearts. They're as complex inside as we are. And yet, fossils of this kind of creature are among the first to be found. Initial complexity, a marvelous testimony to God's creativity.
Completely false. The nautilides from which we get the advanced form of the nautili, like the one that you were mentioning, once varied a great deal in their shell shape and other features, etc. Many of these, however, have gone extinct, and we only have very few still existing today. Another similar lineage, often confused with the nautiloids, are the ammonites. Both the nautilides and the ammonites had spiral shells, but they do not actually come from the same lineage. They are actually two forks from the same origins, i.e. from the cephalopods. So, yes, I just thought I'd mention that. The ammonites are now extinct. However, it is from the ammonites that we got the modern squid, the octopus, the cuttlefish, and ammonites are actually far closer related to these things than the nautiloids. Nautiloids are not in fact related to the squids, the octopuses, or the cuttlefish of today, except for that common lineage from the cephalopods. So, you also got that factually wrong. It is not practically a squid inside a shell.
When I look at the sea creatures that God has created, I look in particular to the fish. They are amazing creatures, starting with their streamlined efficiency, the fact that they are designed to extract oxygen from the water in such an efficient manner, the fact that they have such a pleasing aesthetic values, and also, of course, the great quantities of food they provide for man. Fish have always been fish, according to the fossil record. Yes, fish certainly are an incredible feature of God's living creation.
Don't you also love that accumulative effect where all the plankton that the fish has eaten, all the heavy metals and the radiation in those organisms then passes on to the fish, which then builds it up in greater intensity and then passes this on to us. So if you don't source your fish right, i.e. you get fish from an industrial area or around an area that had a nuclear incident, you can get mental deficiencies caused by heavy metals such as mercury, or you can get cancer caused by excess radiation. That doesn't seem like a very good or safe system in God's apparent design. And as for your comment on how fish have always been fish, no shit, Sherlock. Of course a fish has always been a fish, because you are defining as a fish, therefore it is a fucking fish. A fish does not one day get up and decide, I've had it, I'm going to grow legs and walk onto land. That's not what evolution argues. It is a generational effect, minute changes happening over a vast range of generations that eventually builds up to great amounts of change and means that the new species can no longer breed with their previous species, and then you end up all the different categorical areas of genus and domain, etc. So it's really just a problem of where do we draw this arbitrary line between proto-fish and fish and proto-amphibian. That's where the issue occurs, not with the actual theory of evolution itself. Because what we can do is we can actually see the evolution from proto-fish to fish happening over a range of fossils, including the development of an advanced vertebrate, like the ones that we have today in the vertebrate kingdom. So, we can see that. We can also see the development of a jaw, going from jawless fish to jawed fish. And of course, the classic example is that over so many specimens, we can see how fins have changed, adapted, allowing for fish to come out onto land for short periods of time, for example, mud skippers. And then how, given the time and the new niche of an uninhabited land except for the insects, this would become more and more extreme, allowing for the fish to spend more and more time on land, out of the ocean in reach of large vertebrate predators, giving them a new food source, etc. This would eventually lead to proto-amphibians, and then, given even more time, amphibians, and then eventually reptiles, where they totally severed their link with the water because they no longer had to go back and lay their eggs inside the water. So that's how evolution works.
The obvious sophistication, variety, and beauty of sea creatures shout out a master artist created all things for his good pleasure.
Two words I would never use to describe a bobbit worm is sophistication and beauty. What is a bobbit worm? A bobbit worm is a predatory worm which sits out of the sand with its head just out slightly or sometimes higher up, with its jaws open like that. And the moment it feels a touch anywhere in this area, that jaw clamps shut, sometimes with enough force that it can cut clean through the fish, or there have been reports, I don't know if this is urban legend, of it cutting through people's fingers. Then the bobbit worm proceeds to drag its victim underground where it can be devoured. I'm just going to play you a little clip of a bobbit worm. Warning, this is quite... It is just not for the squeamish, if you understand what I mean. If you don't like stuff like Alien, you're probably not going to like this either. So just play the clip. For those that don't know, the fish that the bobbit worm just ate there, which was mostly out of view, was a venomous lionfish. You know, this isn't the only thing. We have life forms like corals that literally throw out their intestines at night onto the neighbouring coral in attempts to digest them. We have fish and other animals that have the capability to stretch their stomachs to swallow their prey whole and digest them. We have, some of the most venomous creatures like the lionfish, like the blue-ringed octopus, like the sea snails in the oceans. It's not all beautiful. You can't just have the beautiful aspects, oh look at that pretty little fish and that coral and that symbiotic relationship, and then ignore all the terror, the horror, the disgusting parts, etc. You can't just ignore that. And I'm not even going to get into the whole idea that God created a symbiotic relationship where a certain type of fish lives inside the ass of a sea cucumber. What a shitty perspective of life. So yes, that is the end of this episode of God of Wonders, and the end of fish for the rest of the show as far as I know. The next show is on birds, I believe, so I look forward to seeing what they have to say about the birds. So yes, I hope you guys have enjoyed. This is Essence of 4. Take care. Out.